quiet. Who seems quiet? Test. Okay, it might not be quiet. I might have just had the mic in a weird place. All right, so in theory we're streaming. Let's see if Twitch agrees. Yay, we agree. We agree, and now I've got a whole bunch of Twitch notifications crowding the top of my screen. I can do low latency streaming, which is absolutely critical when you've only got 2 people watching. All right, let's go ahead and tell the world that we are streaming. Streaming game dev. Gonna do spaceship parts. Paste. All right, so this game has come to the point where it's possible for me to start to think about finishing the game and moving on to the next phase of my plan to make games. So because of that, I'm thinking that what I'm going to do today is make some more level components, and then what we'll focus on for the next month or so is pounding level components into being fun levels. Now, the problem that we have at the moment is that we don't really have enough parts to make more fun levels. We've only got 2 or 3 parts that break right now, and that means that everything is built out of 3 different parts. And that's not great. So what we're going to do today is we're going to expand that roster a little bit. Now, in the last episode, I made the beginnings of some other categories of ships. I think that might be a little overzealous. I'll go ahead and open it up, but I think what I'm going to end up doing is just expanding the current ship setup instead of creating a new ship setup. But this is the sort of thing that I was working on. It's a ring habitation unit instead of a ship, because I was trying to figure out a way to get the player to go inside, right? But I figured out another way to make the player go inside, and that's just to put things pointed at each other. So that's probably what I'll do. And instead of having this, I'll just leave this, and for now I'm not going to bother with it. And instead what we'll do is we will create a new kind of ship component for a new kind of level element. In the past, we've used mostly ship components based on one particular kind of ship, which is that's the player ship. That's the large call ship engine. So here's the engine, and this is what I'm going to turn into an island element. Currently, we have a lot of engines attached to our various components, but they're all inside of the shell of the ship. What we're going to do today is we're going to take this engine element, and we're going to create a variant or 3. Alboecha says, oh hi, hello, welcome. We're going to create a variant or 3 that floats in deep space. And so what we've got is we've got an engine that's been broken up into 2 parts, the nozzle and the base. And I think technically the nozzle has several different meshes inside of it, but that's fine. Previously, what we've done is we've just bashed up the base in a couple of different ways. I think there's one more, or not. I guess there's not another bash up. I thought there would be. But let's just check and make sure I didn't. Yeah, that's fine. So we might have to create some more bashed up tips, but when we're talking about engines that have been ripped off and sent flying, we're really focusing on the mounting elements, right? That's the part that breaks when the engine detaches. So what we're going to do today is break this mounting bracket. Sorry if the traffic is loud. It's been really bad recently, but that's something we have to live with if we're in a city. So this and this is going to just stay as it is for now. But this, we're going to create a variant that is nice and busted up. Alboecha says models with some details for a change. I'm not sure what he's talking about. If he's talking about me, I think this is about normal. Maybe it's a little bit more detailed. I'm not sure. But maybe he's been watching someone else. Or maybe he's complaining about the prototyping I did last week where I just blocked out shapes. So what we're going to do is, I think that this here is where we're going to have our first rip. We could do it the other way as well. Which side actually mounts into the ship is basically unknown. This side is very, very plain, so I think that that's what we'll rip off. We have to keep in mind that this here actually clunks up like so. So if we rip it, we have to keep in mind that these may be in the splash area for damage. Elboechi says the nozzle looks interesting. This nozzle here is actually fairly realistic, so I like it. The current damage models are just all damaged nozzles. This one's pretty bad. I might redo it later. But what we need to do now is make this break in a way that is fun for us, and that means that we're going to rip off a good chunk, maybe from here to back here somewhere. In order to split off the back end, you can see how we've got a nice cleavable set of faces back here rather than a single face, and that's going to be useful for just cutting like this, and that way we can cut and easily work it out. So we'll just delete these verts, and you can see how that's created a really huge hole in our mesh. So that's what we're going to start as a base, and we're just going to turn this huge hole into an actual damaged, ripped up element. Now currently we are modeling with Y mirroring or Z mirroring turned on. We'll turn Z mirroring off once we've got some more basic shapes working. But for now, I think Z mirroring is probably a good idea so that we don't have to do everything twice. There we go. Like that. And we're just blocking out the basic shape of the damage right now, so we're not going to be doing anything too aggressive, but something like this. And then what we'll do is we will cut into this shape, and then we will bond it, not completely, just partially, to the base, like so. We're going to need to have a little bit of thickness to this. In fact, it's going to have to be a lot more complex than this in general. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create thickness by extrusion. It's very basic, right? Everybody knows you can just extrude these edges and create thickness. So extrude. There we go. Now for closing this off, there are a couple of ways to do it, but I think what we'll do is we will try and get the face creator to work for once. Can we get a grid fill? No, okay. So basically the face grid fill element never works. I'm not sure how it's supposed to work, but no matter how I use it, it works about 1/8 of the time, even though it's great when it does work. So every time I've got to do it manually, which is kind of a pain in the ass. So what we're going to want to do is maybe extrude this like so. Even better than that, we'll extrude this like so. And the reason we're going to do that is just so that when we tidy this up, we'll still have a face loop down the middle, because that's going to be critical for our long-term goal. And then we'll again just extrude this. There we are. And we're going to need to start extruding. We're going to have to be careful with this interior. The interior is going to have to be altered in order to make it look like it is something feasible. But it also has to be altered so that you can fly into it. Not like, you know, deep into the engine itself, but there's going to be something inside here. And that something you're going to want to be able to interact with. Specifically, you're going to want to be able to grab components from it. So, did I leave? I did. It's an interesting random floating element there. Let's go ahead and take this thing away for a second, because that's dumb. We're going to delete that. It doesn't make any sense. But we do need to have this set up, so that's what we're going to just put in now. And this is not supposed to be so thick. It is just a thin metal sheet over an interior object. And we have a choice as to how we want to set up this particular join. But since it is a tear... Oh, this is actually torn off. That was why we were having trouble. That's fine. That's good. That leaves us with a face loop. Good. Perfect. And how the interior looks inside of that, well, rather than continuing to model around in the guts of this, what I'm going to do is put in the interior object that this engine runs off of. And that's going to be just a linear accelerator. So it's going to look pretty basic. We're going to create it as a separate object because we're going to want to use an array modifier on it. So we'll start with a circle. Rotate x 90, and then we'll scale it up by 3, thereabouts. And we'll just extrude an element. Yeah, like that, perhaps. We'll go for the whole length. We'll extrude an element to a length of... I have no idea how big this is. Back off. If we go at a crooked angle, we can get it to click at 1 no matter what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and make it, I think that's 5. That's 4. That's 5. We'll give it a 5-unit size, and then we'll move the whole thing back so we can see how it looks in the middle of this object. So now we've got a 5-long circle, and it's not big enough, so we're going to scale it up, but we're going to want to be careful not to scale it up on the z-axis, or on the y-axis rather. And that should be large enough. Yeah, I think that's probably large enough. And then what we'll do is we'll cut it into something where it looks like a particle accelerator. And that would be something like this, where we extrude and then shrink on everything but the y-axis, like so. And the particle accelerators do look a lot like this, but they have a lot of fun details and stuff. We're just kind of trying to give the impression of a particle accelerator. Now, right now, what we've got is a perfect circle. We don't need a perfect circle, so we're going to go ahead and delete all of the parts that are... Oh, it's off-center. Okay, so I screwed it up at some point. We're going to just delete that and start again. And this time we're going to be changing over into median instead of active point, because having it screw up like that was not great. So we're going to scale this up like so. And then we're going to extrude 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to pull the whole thing out so you can see it. And now we're back where we were. Once again, bevel, extrude in, get rid of the y-axis, but scale on the other axes, nice and round. That's more like it. That's a little thin. There we go. Bevel. And then delete half of it. In actuality, we're going to delete more than half. We're going to delete 3/4. And then we'll turn on mirroring for X and Y, or X and Z. It's X and Z, isn't it? Yeah, there we are. So in this way, we don't have to edit quite so much. Now, if we want to give it the feel of being a particle accelerator, we've got to have a little bit more interesting stuff in terms of topological fun. So we're going to go ahead and create some extrusions that feel reasonable, like so. There we go. And then over here, we're going to have kind of hooking extrusions that go between these fingers. And hopefully that will feel relatively natural, just on the pure y-axis here. If we scale these down, we want to scale them down by individual origins. And that'll give us more of a finger set that fits in between rather than clips into. The last thing we're going to want to do is take these outer edges . I can't see because I'm modeling this inside of another object, which is not the right way to do it, but whatever, right? And we're just going to move that. I guess we can't really move it back, so we're going to bevel it away. Not that badly, like that. There we go. And then we're going to move the whole thing out into the open so that I can friggin' see it. There we go. When we put on an array modifier, we'll be able to create an arbitrary number. That's a mirroring. Here we are. So it's going to be 1. We're going to be able to create an arbitrary number of these all attached to each other like so. And the idea is that the rolling finger setup will make it feel like a continuous band of objects, which I think is going to work fine. Just going to want to smooth this. Nope, sorry. Wrong button. Smooth this, and then go over here and turn on auto smoothing, and that'll give us a nice set of schematic stuff going on here. We're going to want to have something that runs down the sides of these, and to do that we're going to want to be a little careful because it's easy to get carried away. But I think we're going to put in another piece there, and then we're going to just extrude these 2 faces up. And unfortunately, I forgot to turn on clipping. So, clipping. There we go. Whoop. Better. And then what we'll do is we'll merge these 2 with a join command. Oop. That's, what is it? W? There it is. Bridge edge loops. And that way it is a straight beam running across, as you can see. And if we bevel the edges, it'll look relatively decent. Nope, that's the wrong set of edges. There you go, like that. So now if we put this back into the engine, you can see how it sort of looks. Now we can move it and scale it so it's not stuck being quite this size, but you can see that the engine circle isn't quite enveloping the whole thing now that we've got this giant piece coming out the side. There are 2 solutions to that. But I think one of the solutions we're obviously going to need is that we're going to want to pull this in quite a bit. It's just too big right now. But I also think that we want to move this entire thing further into the ship engine. Not enough to poke through the far side, but enough to be set in. Now what that results in is an oversized interior object, and the player can't get through this oversized interior object. And that's the whole point. We want the player to come in and then be like, oh, there's something in there that I can't get through. And in that way, we won't have to worry about making the interior work. We can just say that you can't go into the interior. And it looks reasonable from the outside, and that's all that matters. So here we're going to extrude back, and we're also going to be putting in some debris and stuff. So we don't have to worry too much about we don't have to worry too much about edges clipping through each other, because there's going to be a lot of debris in here the player's not going to be able to see very well. Now, I don't know if there's any good way to edit interiors. I've used a lot of different modeling programs in my day. And none of them have been very good at modeling interior objects like this, interior faces like this. It may simply be that there is no decent way to do it. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Obviously, one basic suggestion is you can use hide to hide vast amounts of the object. And in that way, you can get away with modeling, for example, boom. Now I can see this lip here, and I can model it. That always seemed like it really wasn't quite as good as I would like it to be in terms of, usability, because you're constantly hiding and unhiding things. But maybe that's what everybody does. Oh, well, I guess that's fine either way. No, it's not. I screwed that up somehow. Let's try one more time here. Nope, it's not going to work. Oh, shit. Let's go ahead and redo that. Is it Control-Shift-Z to redo? Yeah, good. And Control-Z to undo one step, but it's not going to work anymore. So basically, we've got to plow this back into the interior a little bit further. I'm going to go ahead and hide that so I can see what I'm doing. But as I said, that makes it a little bit annoying. There we go. And that's probably okay. I can continue to just close this set of gaps if I need to, but I don't think I'll worry too much about that. Let's go ahead and unhide it, go back in here and take a look. And you can see that I had to unhide things that I wanted to stay hidden. We'll move them off so that I don't have to worry about them so much. So you can sort of see how this is going to work. And the player is going to see this, and there's going to be lots of debris, but there's definitely some stuff left that we have to do. One of the things we have to do is we have to create the sense of damage to this internal object such that it will connect up properly. And I think to do that, we're going to want to start by having this pipe come ripping out and going somewhere. And that way we can have some fun with pipe topology. And everybody loves having fun with pipe topology, right? But here's the problem. At this stage, we have now officially entered into the time when we're not going to be able to use z-axis mirroring. So we're going to go ahead and unmirror it. And then we're going to undo that. And UV unwrap it. And then unmirror it. Boom. Because these pipes are we're going to want to have them be pretty unique from each other, otherwise it'll be blatantly obvious that they're mirrors. So if we then turn on connected proportional editing, we can move this out into the open and rotate it, and then move it however we want in order to make it feel like it's being ripped out of the side there. And we can go even further because we have this set of faces here. If we wanted to, we could cut through all of these faces. This adds a lot of polys to the overall mesh though, so it's not really a great idea. A cheaper version would be to simply duplicate these and then create cuts, but I think what we'll do instead is we'll just put debris there. Anyway, this pipe has to have an interior, and the interior is obviously going to be more smaller pipes. So we'll extrude, We'll extrude and scale this down, and then we'll scale it and move it back into the object. And then just close it off. And of course, we'll grab something else, like say this guy here. It's got fewer edges, so I think it's fewer edges, so it's a cheaper mesh to use. We'll just embed it in there somewhere. It doesn't really matter where. And we'll just rotate it until it's vaguely facing the right direction, and then we'll use Control-Click to bring it out. And we can just repeat that process with another one. Maybe move it a little bit off axis here. And again, Control-Click to bring it out. Now to give these a little bit more heft, we're going to, oh, would you look at that? So Control-Clicking didn't work great, because rather than bringing over a segment, I brought over a single object. And for some reason, sometimes Blender decides that when you bring out a single object, it means that you would like every other one to be facing the opposite direction. Don't know why. We'll go ahead and recalculate, and that Blender will bring it right back in, and we'll keep going. Try that again. To make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to come at it from a different angle so that the edge will move off into a strange, fun little location. And then what we'll do is we'll select that back edge and we'll duplicate the whole pipe element, just so that we don't have a problem with flipping faces. Yeah, that's probably okay. Now, in order to make this feel a little bit more natural, we have a lot of options. We could put in like even smaller pipes coming out of the big pipes and so on and so forth. But I don't think I want to go into that level of detail, so we're just going to have them taper off a little bit. There's going to be a lot of debris in the area, and that's always what I'm using in this particular game in order to mask the laziness that I have when I'm doing some of this modeling, because I need to model this stuff pretty fast in order to ever finish with the game. So with that in mind, let's move on to the other one. Once again, we're going to want to move it in a manner which feels like it got ripped. So whereas the other one, oh, there is a bug in my room. So whereas the other one got pulled out, I'm going to have this one get pushed back and skewed. And you can see that this leaves us with a fairly wonky shape. It's no longer a straight shape in any stretch. But that's not too bad because it's damaged. So we can actually use that to give it a really damaged feel, which is kind of what we want. And once again, we'll just extrude in and cap off and create some variants. So this time what I'll do is I will grab an entire ring instead of just one loop. There we go. Scale it up a little bit. And then once again, control click to pull it out. Oh, missed it. Come on, seriously? It's right there. Grab it. Grab it. So I accidentally skewed that a little bit. We're going to just take that from a slightly different angle and see if we can get it to bend. There we are. It's a little bit less skewed. And then fold that off. And then once again, we'll grab this base, duplicate it, and move it. And then this one we'll pull out and up. Scale it down. Scale it down. There are a couple of things we're going to want to do to make it a little bit more palatable. We're going to bevel a couple of these turns. We don't want to bevel all of them, but we would like it to feel like they are something that could physically exist. And we're going to just adjust some of these until they feel a little bit more natural. Yeah. And we also need to tell them all that they're smooth. Boom. That way we'll get these grooves that run along instead of looking like it's just a stack of pipes. The other thing I think I want to do is put in some pipe damage. I could put it on those tips, but I think I want to put it in here. Now the way to do pipe damage in a really, really easy fashion is to duplicate the surface of the pipe and move it in a little bit. And then the surface that you duplicated, extrude it back until it's past that. And you might be wondering, why don't you just extrude and then stop? Well, that's because, in my opinion, this works best if you have something that is clearly not the same as the rest of the pipe. And in this case, that means that we can grab some of these elements in here. I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, come on. For now, we're just going to grab this whole thing and move it out so I can just tweak it a little bit. So, for example, you can bring this down and bring this in and then put it back. And you'll end up with something that is clearly not part of the same mesh. And that means that there's something inside of the pipe. At least that's what I'm going to go ahead and pretend. And I just happen to think that that looks a little bit more believable. But you can do whatever you want. The other thing I'm going to do is bevel these edges. Because even though it's a rip, it's not supposed to feel like it is fake. Like a crisp fake rip. Yeah, that's fine. Now for the interior object. Now this gnat really likes my face. I'm not a big fan of his though. We're going to go ahead and apply the array modifier. But in this case, we have to realize that the array modifier being applied before the mirror modifier means that we still have this unmirrored result. That's what we would like. The reason we're doing this is because we don't actually want to mirror it on the x-axis. See? Just this hollow interior face is fine. We don't have to worry about that. And because of that, we can save a lot of effort. Also, we have to model this in a way where it feels like it's properly merging into the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to close that Interesting. Oh, I see. I was hoping just to get the back face, and it instead got everything. That's not too bad. We can just turn on that Z modifier and just grab like that. And now we can face. There we are. If we extrude this in like so and then move it forward, that's just a kind of easy, silly way to put it into the rest of the mesh, right? In order to make it feel a little bit more natural, we'll grab these finger elements. And we will extrude them separately and pull them in like so. And that'll give us something that feels like it's not quite so abrupt. This here is still a problem, but what we'll do is we'll scale it down on the x-axis. And I think the easiest way to do that will actually be to pull it down on the x-axis, since scaling will pull it in an awkward fashion there. Just repeat the process a little bit here. And then this we can pull back. Now, if we pull it far enough, you can see that we have some inverted faces going on here. We've got some complicated faces. That's not a big deal. We'll just pull this until those faces are a little bit straighter. And then we'll just pretend that this whole thing got ripped. Right, and now if we want to, we can insert a dent or two just to make it feel a little bit more natural. And a fun way to add in a dent on an object like this is to use the cut command and cut a crease maybe like this. And then what you can do is you can set that crease to be sharp. And then move it until it really shows. So, see? Now that's a relatively convincing damaged piece of gear. Hold on a moment. My allergies are getting to me. Bugs and allergy season. You bet. So, there we have the basics. Let's go ahead and customize these two wings that we created so that they feel a little bit more natural. And that's just a matter of moving them so they're not quite so linked up with each other. And then we may do a system where we crisp up those edges with a bunch of extra polygons. Yeah, that's good enough. So you can see that we've got some areas here that are crisper than others. We really want to focus on the areas that the player is probably going to see, and that means that we're definitely going to want to put in some extra faces. There's a little bit of a price to extra faces, but it's not as high as you might think, so I don't worry about it too much. And then we'll just carve out to here, and once again mark that as sharp. Oh, well, if I mark that as sharp, I mark everything as sharp. There we are, sharp. Once we've done that, we can grab one of these other elements and crisp it up until it looks like a proper piece of damage. Yeah, there we go. And you can just do this process whenever you need. This is not something that you have to worry about too much, as long as you don't accidentally create any concave faces. Because if you create a concave face, Unity will probably barf. So in general, you want to be careful not to accidentally create too many concave faces. If you do create a concave face, just cut it into multiple quads, and there it's no longer a concave face, right? Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and create some crisping up here, like so. I missed. Try that again. There we go. And to make this one crisp, I think I'm going to actually just move the whole thing down. We're going to want to grab this guy. And this guy. So there we go. And this edge here is very, very fakey. It doesn't look good at all. So we're just going to go ahead and bevel here and pull the bevel out. And that'll give us just a little bit of cracking and creasing at the parts where we kind of want there to be cracking and creasing. I'm going to adjust this one so that it's a little bit less obvious. And then I'm going to bring it so that it cuts across and out. And these can be crisp edges. And that will give it just a little bit of a feel of being nice and crisp. You can see that we've got an errant crease that I don't want. We'll just get rid of that. This here isn't crisp enough, so we'll bring it down until it is crispier. Yeah, there we are. This one here, I actually want this one to cut back up across the back of the object. So like that. And once again, we'll just set that to be sharp. And we'll just move it back. And you can see how that creates a crease that runs out along. And now we've got a fairly convincing set of creases. These creases are baked into the mesh. If I was going to optimize this, what I would do is I would have a low poly mesh that doesn't have all those extra creases. And I'd turn this into a just a standard normal map. But I don't want to do that in this case because the player is going to get really close. And I don't want the player to think that there is, there's just a normal map there, because the normal maps are pretty obvious and end up looking pretty crappy if you're that close. Let's see if I can get this to work in a way that actually feels right. So this crease here is what's bothering me now. Let's go ahead and try and get this to be a little bit less craptacular. Basically, we just want to hide exactly where the faces are here. We don't want it to feel like this engine has a really obvious set of faces. So to prevent that, we're just trying to massage this so that it breaks up the flow of these faces enough that the player won't think that these are just polygons. Then they'll start to think of it as something believable, and it just won't enter their brains that it's a model, you know? So to do that, we're just going to put in some extra cuts here and there and move some stuff around, and hopefully it should work. So you can see that we've got this guy here. I would like that to be smoother. There we go. And then lastly, this guy here. Can I smooth him out? It might be a little tough. There we are. That's not too bad. So now you can see that we've got this torn piece. It doesn't really look torn, but that's okay. We'll put in the structural elements that look like they've been torn up. We'll put those in during the game, or in the scene view. Now for the downstairs, we're going to want to actually adjust the entire shape of this hole. It's just a little bit too symmetrical. So we're going to pull the entire hole upwards like this. And then we'll just go ahead and reshape the rest of the wing with that in mind. And we can afford to be pretty aggressive with this reshaping. It's nothing sacred here. We can just do whatever we please. One of the things we're definitely going to want to do is give it a skew. So we'll just grab these wing elements here. And skew it. There we go. Now once we've given it a skew, we have the opportunity to make it feel like it's folding, and we're going to just do exactly that by cutting like this. And then this line here will be our crease. And we're going to want to make sure that this crease feels like a crease. And we also want to make it so that it doesn't feel like this part is creased, because that's an obvious mesh element, and it looks really terrible. So the problem is this sudden dip at the back here. If we do some more cutting, we might be able to smooth that dip into our favor. That didn't work. Is this an exterior point? It doesn't really matter, does it? Just cut. And then we'll make that sharp. There we go. That's a little bit better. And then we have what looks like a nice crisscrossed cut-up area. We've got this floating face here. See that? That's due to this exterior element. This quad is really not a great quad. So when we cut it, we're going to cut it for several reasons. We're going to want to create a crisp edge here, but we're also going to want to break up that nasty quad because it's just awful. So once we've done that, we no longer have that really aggressive inverted quad or concave quad. But we still have this issue where the interior needs to be just massaged a little bit. And I think that should do it. Now we do have an issue where we've got a lot of really obvious creases here. Those aren't going to be as bad as you think. This here, for example, looks like a really obvious triangular crease, but we can just modify that so it's obviously not a triangle, and it might be a little bit better. Another option is that we can bevel here and create some sort of more natural feeling event. But the real problem with this is simply that this is a low poly element, and we really don't need it to be a low poly element. So we're going to bevel that whole area until it's a little bit less low poly, and then we'll just adjust these until they feel a little bit more natural. You can see how this is a really straight line. We're just going to adjust it until it's not. This can be massaged just a touch. And then this, just drag it out. There we are. That's actually not too bad. And then up here we've got this situation again where when it hits the original frame shape, it's really obvious and ugly. So once again, we'll just pull that until it doesn't feel like it is an obvious merge. And in the back here, we've got this one crease here, which is not working. So we're just going to pull that until it isn't a problem. And then what we'll do is we'll cut from here to here, and we'll create a nice crisp set of edges for that. Oh, we accidentally crisped up this edge, which we'll smooth out. But we still have this issue where this face is really pretty bad, and the reason for that is simply because it's such a big face. It's not a quad. So we'll go ahead and cut that into tries, just so that we can get it under control a little bit. And once we have it under control, we can massage it. And you can see we've got another face that's got an inverted set of, it's a concave face. We don't want that. There we are. This, I want to get rid of, there we are. Good. That's decent. All right, so now we've got the edges with the nice crisp elements that feel a little bit more natural. And we've got the pipes that come out, and I'm pretty much calling this a day for this particular object. There are still, however, some things that are left to do. Most notably, we've got to do some UV unwrapping here, and some material assignment. So let's go ahead and get to that. Also, this in here, I don't think I UV unwrapped it, so now I've got to UV unwrap it here, and that's going to make it feel a little bit strange if I ever use textures on it, because it's not going to have a nice repeating texture. Whatever, though. Anyway, we're going to join that into the main object, because it's just one object. And we will set the whole thing as machinery. And that's probably fine, but I think it would be good if we had just a little bit of light, not like actual glow, but a little bit of something that wasn't just black. So what we'll do is we will have this loop. Oh, we can't grab it as a loop. Can we grab this as a loop? Oh, let's go ahead and merge doubles. There we are. So if we grab that and that as loops and mark them as highlighted, boom, then we should have something where it has a nice little streak down it. See? And that's just a real cheap and easy way to set that up. Now, these plugs, we're going to want to be a little bit more careful with because they look really dumb right now. So we'll just make those into machinery because machinery is a dark, indistinct material that's built specifically to hide the weak points of the models. So once we've done that, we can then grab these and mark those as highlight. There we go. And we're going to want this interior set to be a so let's grab this and just move it aside for a second. This interior set here, we're going to want this to be a machinery set. And then this, when we move it back in, it's going to be a highlight. There we go. Now, as for this damaged set of faces, we're not going to worry about it too much. I could set up the interior face as machinery. That's probably not a bad idea. I'm not 100% sure. Let's go ahead and try it. So if we were to select a lot of the faces here, let's try that again. So you can see that it kind of selects a lot of random stuff because I'm not really being very careful about it. That's fine. And we turn that all into machinery. You can see how it's got mostly a really dark interior, which is probably what we want. We probably want to hide the simplicity of that particular mesh section. And we're going to be filling it up with debris in the actual game world. So this is going to be our ripped out island engine. There we are. Now for the tip, we're gonna go ahead and keep this tip largely intact, but we're just gonna grab these and move them out because they are pretty silly, stuck in the system like this. It's just not. Hold on. Now we'll try it. There we are. And that'll just make it look a little bit better. So that's going to just be named Engine Island Tip 1. Now we're not going to want to lock the same tips to the same bases all the time, but I'll think more about that later. The Relin says, why so much attention to small details? Well, those aren't small. I don't think I've seen the Relin around in the game before, in my stream before. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play and show them how big that engine is. Got some delay here, that's fine, we'll figure it out. Do we have an engine core anywhere? We might not have any engines in this setup. So if there's any engines, they're going to be back here. I don't see any. Maybe there's no engines in this random level. But these engines are big, so if you take a look, this is the scale of the object we're talking about. So, nope, no engines. Great. But these are similar sized objects, and they're huge. They're much, much larger than the player's ship, which if we look at the player's ship over here, you can see how tiny that is in comparison. So these really aren't small details, unfortunately. They're extremely large details, and we need to make sure that when the player gets close, they don't have to buy that it is some kind of highly defined supermodel. But they do have to buy that it's not so distracting that they lose focus. And what we're going to want to do now is introduce that, close this, don't need it, introduce that object into our level chunk system. So, nope, these are not debris sized unless you are talking about very large debris. So we're going to go ahead and pull in one of our level chunks. It doesn't really matter which one we're pulling in because all I need is the actual containment object because I don't want to redefine it. All of these are turned off at the moment. If I turn them on, this is the complexity of a normal element. But what we're doing now is we're doing an island element, and the island elements are a lot simpler. Now, I'm not going to delete all of this stuff, but I am going to delete quite a few of it. We're going to pull out one of these floating debris guides because we're going to need them. But inlets, outlets, and then everything else can go. Maybe we'll keep one of the hull plates just because I don't want to have to recreate it later. Structural beam, yeah, this stuff. Mostly we can just delete all of it. We'll leave some of these in and delete. And before we accidentally save over the broken ship cargo rail, we're going to call this an island engine. We're going to drop that into our prefabs here. And then we're going to just go ahead and create an engine that's floating in space. And to do that, we're going to just want to grab an engine model and stick it in. Unfortunately for us, there is no engine model that is currently in use, but we can just drop the Coal Ship engine directly inside of this object and then delete the pieces we don't need, or rather move the engine islands out into the main setup here. We're going to move the tip into the base just so we can drag them both around at the same time. And now you can see that we've got our model here in the game world. It hasn't got the right materials on it though, so we're going to want to just grab some of these materials and make sure that they match up. Are we using blue? I don't remember. It does. We can fix it later if we need to. And then we'll just pop the machinery in. There we go. And basically what we want to do is we want to have this at quite a distance from the starting position. So this blue here, this is the starting position. And what we want to do is have the engine get ripped off and flung a considerable distance away so that it feels like it is off in a new area. And that'll draw the player away from whatever complicated crap they're involved in right now. And allow them to journey across a large empty space. This is also something which is hard because there is a spy or a military vessel, a military scanner that fires every so often, and if you're caught in space when that fires, you are almost certainly in a lot of trouble. So something like that. Like that, yeah. So let's go ahead and create the debris chains. Now, right now we do not have any debris chains that are particularly good at looking like chains, but we do have debris models that we can use to create a sweep, because what we're going to want to do is have a path that goes like this. And for that, we're going to focus mostly on the debris casters instead of the structural elements. So this is a debris caster. And you can see that it has a yellow box. That really defines how the debris caster is casting. If we move the debris caster over here into the object, oh, that's not into the object. Boy, is that not into the object. Let's drop it inside. There we go. And then 0, 0, 0. There we are. If we put it inside of the object like this, we can then move it until it will cast in the direction we want it to cast. It's a little bit big right now, so we're going to go ahead and make it 10, 10, and 100. There we are. And it's a bounding box, so we're probably going to want to spin it until it's aligned and then rotate it like this. And that's basically all we need to do for that section. I think I'll make it a little bit wider. Yoop. And then we're going to want to have the same thing but out in the base area to point in the other direction. And that way we'll be able to have it connected by these two debris casters pointing at each other. That is the theory anyway. So if we take a look and we try and align these debris casters, they don't have to be perfect, but we just want basically the player to feel like there is a link. Oh, and I didn't put it anywhere near the... Having a hard time with my 3D spatial awareness today, I'm afraid. So we're going to want to do it like this, and then we'll pull it down and rotate it. Just keep massaging it until it's pointed correctly, like that. And the other thing we're going to need to do is have some kind of base, which is why I left this, because this is really not a bad base for an engine to have been ripped off of, right? At least in theory. So we'll do it like that. And then we'll take these, we'll take this hull plate, and we'll use the hull plate just to disguise this loose tip a little bit. We don't have to be too careful about it, but we just need to make it so it doesn't look like there is just one specific model floating in space, right? So like this. And then all we do is move some of these debris elements over into this area to make it so the player wants to go somewhere else. Now there is a risk here because we are talking about putting in debris elements so that you want to follow other debris elements, and that's something that might not be a natural fit. So we're going to need some additional guiding elements in order to pull the player into going the direction we want them to go. And first off, we're going to delete this guy. And then we're going to delete these guys. What are you? There you are. But we're also going to need a new prefab. We should have a Sparky Lights prefab. Sparky pipe. There it is. We'll drop that Sparky pipe into the island engine, and we will put it along this element. Come on, be in the right spot. I guess we'll drop it inside of the structural beam. That'll make it easy to align, right? Oh, well, it's a little bit large. Let's go ahead and put it in the right spot. And basically, the Sparky lights will always lead away from whatever we want them to lead away from. But they have to. But I would point them in a specific direction. And in this case, I think that we'll want them to point in this direction, right? That seems like it would be wise. We're also going to want to put Sparky pipes inside the engine. So we'll duplicate the Sparky pipes, drop it inside of the engine, and once again, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then move it until we can see it and it guides us into this area. Now you might have noticed that I left a really, really flat beam in the middle of this. See that beam? You know, remember it when we were modeling? Let's see if we can get the center of the camera to work with us. That's a good spot for this to mount. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to mount it straight onto that beam. And you can see that that mounts pretty straight. It's not a big difficulty, but it is rotated 90 degrees. So come on, rotate. There we are. And that way, it'll actually be facing the correct direction, and it can be mounted on it, like so. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. The easiest way to take a look is to turn off the level builder, and then hit play. So, where is it? Did I put it? Yeah, I put it over here, okay. So this is what it looks like. You're gonna start over here though. It's not actually aligned with the player at the moment. It aligns with the player automatically in level creation, but we're not doing level creation. So let me go ahead and get into position. It's gonna look like this basically. So the question is, when you're looking at it like this, what do you feel like you want to do? As long as the player starts far enough to the right, it should be fairly easy for the player to see that there is something over there. But I think what we're going to want to do is really make sure that this starting point is in exactly the spot, because otherwise it's going to make no sense to the player and they're going to get upset. So we're just going to make it so that this starting point points directly at the engine, and you start in some place where you're going to be able to see the engine like that. Right, so with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and save that, and then we'll delete it. And then we're going to go into our level builder, turn it on, and these active modules, here they are. This is the module list. We're just going to add this to the module list. So, ship parts. Nope, that's not it. Level chunks. There we are. This is the island engine. And now, one thing I forgot to add in the collectibles. So let's go ahead and put in some collectibles. The prefab for that should be named something like Debris Boy. Oh, it's under harvestables. There we are, Debris Boy. And we'll just drop that into the island engine like so, and move it into place. And then we'll have it so that it's something you can collect, right? And we may as well have it work with the other objects that are already in the scene. So if we rotate like that, we can mount it on top of our sparky lights. But there is a chance that these don't get spawned. These things are always kind of half-assed. So we'll duplicate it, and we'll have 2 or 3 of them. I want to put one of them on the tip of the of these cables here, just because I think that would be neat. And we're going to want to put one more somewhere else that can be seen pretty clearly. Actually, I think that's probably fine. But we do have an issue, and that is colliders. So the core issue with this is that right now, there are no colliders for this. If we attempt to create colliders, we're going to end up creating some really terrible ones. So here, for example, we put a mesh collider in here. We can leave it as a convex mesh collider. That's going to be expensive, but I think it's our only option because we have hooks. Same with back here. I would love for this island engine to have a mesh collider that was concave, or convex, that was convex, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be a concave collider because we need to be able to fly inside of it. Those are expensive, but it's not going to be too bad, I think. We'll see. If it is bad, we will fix it. The Relin says, do you have an older video where you go through the performance management of all of that debris? Yes, I do. Let me go ahead and see if I can track it down for you. Go into my account. It's gotten harder and harder to use YouTube. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. Go to my channel. Yes. That's the third time I've clicked on my channel. There we are. And we'll just do a search for, trying to remember the name of the, No, it's called, there it is. I'll just post that into chat for you. There you go. Now that doesn't cover absolutely everything I'm doing because I'm doing a lot of LOD stuff, but that does cover the basics. All right, so we're in a debris field. Just moving along. There is a lot of stuff in our way here. Oh, I see that there are some things that need to have some colliders added, because that didn't work. All right, so clearly there is at least one object that is badly aligned, one level chunk that is badly aligned. I'll have to work with that. So in this case, we got a long distance guide immediately, but it's not the one that I made just now. It's a different one that's a little bit simpler. Just pop on over and see what sort of fun we can have. Bum 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 bum. Doom doom da-dum da-dum. Oh no, we're gonna crash! Rah! Oh, good, we did get one. So that is the thing that we created, this last thing. As you come out from the rest of the field, you're supposed to be able to see what's going on, and that's pretty much the case here. You could immediately see there was an engine off in the distance, but since then I've drifted into the debris. It's a little hard to see, but if I do a radar scan, you can pick it up immediately. It's over there. We'll go over and take a look. Make sure that we can bounce off of it and not walk through it. By the way, if you're interested in that video, it's the GPU video. Just search for GPU on my channel. You'll see it immediately. Oh, look, we flew straight through it. So unfortunately for us, the collider either didn't save or doesn't work. So there is no collider. So I guess I just didn't save it. Great. Okay, so let's try that again. This time we'll try and save it. Oh, there's a mesh collider. Oh, that's a mesh collider on the... the problem is I'm an idiot. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And we'll put it on the actual engine. Because that's that's what makes sense. There we go. That's a little better. And the engine island tip already has one. Now what we need to watch out for is warnings that it is too high poly. So we'll see. Of course, whether or not I get it is up for debate. The reason that I'm actually playing through it like this rather than spawning it in using a cheat is simply because I really want to get a feel for the levels I'm creating. I haven't done any kind of extensive playtesting on them yet. So I want to get a feel for what flows and what doesn't flow. Of course, the game dev is the worst tester that there could possibly be, because they go into it with all sorts of opinions on how it's supposed to be, and they don't see the problems. So obviously that's not a great way to do your testing, but it is better than not testing at all. So we're just gliding along. Right now we're not using any guides, and because of that we've ended up in some strange places. But there is the engine off in the distance there. Now we're gonna bounce off of it. We better bounce off of it. Yeah, good. We bounced off of it. Great. So it turns out that this model is not too high poly for a concave collider. But, I mean, it's not going to be very performant, so we're going to have to be careful about that. The good news is that the debris does not use the same collider system, so it's a lot cheaper. Now that we're inside the engine, taking a look around, let's see how it looks. Now, as I said, we're going to be putting a lot of debris in the engine, so it's going to be hard to see the weak points in our design, just because there's so much crud. I just copied this debris caster straight up, so I didn't optimize it in any way for looking like the engine. And the result is that the engine is crammed with debris, and it is just everywhere. But I'm not too unhappy with that. I think that might not be too bad. Maybe it's too much. I mean, I might want to reduce the number of debris. maybe by half. Let's go ahead and reduce the debris a little bit. So there's the debris caster that we're trying to use, and unfortunately it's there. Good, got it selected. Right now we're using 10,000. Let's bring it down to 5,000, and we're also going to reduce the Y size to a nice tight beam, like so. And then we'll just go ahead and see if we can make the spawning element a little bit better. One of the issues we've got here is simply that it's hard for the player to see what we're seeing here in the dev studio, just because the player's coming at it, it's randomly rotated, it's randomly set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this and see whether or not I can get this to feel just a little bit more natural. Then we'll go ahead and hit apply and delete it and hit play. So we spawned in the middle of some debris here. Look at this. All right, well, just cruise on through. And you can see how these sparkling lights, they really do catch your eye, and they really help you figure out where you're trying to go. At least that's the hope. And look, perfect. You can see the engine off in the distance. It just worked. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. So let's take a look and see whether or not this setup feels decent to look at. Coming a little fast there. Oh, crunch. Okay, so it looks like we might want to worry a little bit about colliders, because you can actually wedge yourself pretty deep in there, but I guess that's okay. It's not too bad. So one of the fun things that we've got here are these sparkly lights are directly inside of the debris field, which really makes it feel like the debris field is part of whatever happened to the engine. At least that's my opinion. I think that doesn't feel too bad at all. And then what happens is the engine has the export pipe, the out pipe of the level is over here. So you can continue to move along after you've looked at the engine. When you look down the snout of the engine, you'll see some other element to interact with. And in this case, it's some cargo or some residential areas that have been ripped apart. Yeah. I don't think that's too bad. This, however, is. So where we are right now is terrible. So if we go over into the ship, which is right there, what we've got is a setup where one of these is backwards. So click, there it is. So the issue here is that these actually have directionality. The base is here, and unfortunately this one's pointed the wrong way, which means that we have a flat wall of debris like this, and that's just the stupidest thing. So we're going to fix that right now. This is the broken ship resident rail. So we're going to just spawn the broken ship resident rail in, and then we're going to go down and fix it up. It's all turned off at the moment. We'll turn it all on, and then we'll turn it all back off again when we're done. And you can just see that I just didn't notice that it was backwards when I built it. Because it's clearly just supposed to be exactly the opposite setup, where it is butted up against that wall and casting debris this way. In fact, it's a little short. Yoink. Perfect. And that's how it's supposed to be. So now we'll turn them all back off. We turn them off so that when they load into the game world, there is a minimum of pausing. All right, we're back. And you can see that we started off with our new engine island right away. And it should be fairly clear that there's something over there. So that's where we're going to go. If we do get distracted and try and look around, then the sparking lights should help us to get back on track. But you can't really see them because the debris field is so thick. They're right there. right, so there is our new setup. And then when we get off of this guy, we go straight into the next section, which is a cargo section. It looks like the other side is the damaged side. Yeah, that's the damaged side. And then we got more cargo. Oh, that's residential. And then more cargo over here. And that is that level. And I think that that's going to do me for today, unless you guys have a question or want to see something specific. Because that feels like it is a good hour's work. And I have some stuff I want to do besides this. But that looks like it might be a backwards launcher. It might also just be that that's a small launcher with a lot of debris in it. Let's take a look. I'm going to take some screenshots and then I'm going to call it a day. So this is the time that you should ask some questions if you want to. That's not it. I'm at the wrong end of this long red chain. So if we take a look, we are here, and we are looking where? That way, up towards the tip. So, we're probably seeing this. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. Well, I'll leave it like that for now. All right, let's go ahead and try and take some screenshots. The Relin says, you plan on doing any more coding tutorials? Very interested in the mixing system of yours. Well, I do coding tutorials whenever I think of something I want to show off, but my day job involves coding, and recently it's involved a lot of coding. So I've always been pretty burned out. That's why I've been focusing mostly on level design in my streams, or in these streams. So if there are things that people really want to know, I'm happy to try and share it. But right now I'm focused mostly on trying to develop this game and try a couple of prototypes. I bought a whole bunch of mech components, and I'm going to try to get a mech thing. I got a prototype for a mech thing I want to try out. Well, this will be a good set of screenshots. Relin says that he liked my coding architecture video, and that's why he's here. That sounds good to me. I make videos in the hopes that people will enjoy them, but make sure that you don't get too enamored with my particular approach. It's always look around, because there are lots of different approaches, and everybody's a little different, and everybody's projects are a little bit different. Let's go ahead and post these to Twitter. Made a new level element. Screenshot Saturday. I guess nobody does this anymore. Or is it Saturday screenshot? I think it's screenshot Saturday. It's no longer autofilling, so I guess it's unimportant. No longer popular. Let's go to it. Bum, 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 bum. This unupgraded ship is really pretty slow. And screenshot. Crunch. I might want to lower the particle size, actually. I think the particles might just be too big. Oh, I stopped it rather than pausing it. Oh well. Here are some messy screenshots. Let's go ahead and put it into the game world just so I can take a screenshot of it in its raw state. Let me see here. The issue I had was that you named everything in it inventory, and after a while it was hard to follow what you were referring to. Yeah, I'm not sure. We had the problem was that we had it wasn't really a problem. It was a naming convention. We had inventory items, and then we had inventories that contained inventory items, and then we had inventory UIs, which displayed the inventory, and then we had inventory item UIs, which displayed the inventory items. So yeah, lots of inventory. Relin says you should fix the camera because when we exit the game it crashes. That's something that should only happen in dev mode. I'm gonna have to look into exactly why it happens, but it's not something that should affect players. So it hasn't been high on my priority list, but I'll take a look and see if I can catch why it's happening. I know that this version of Unity is now obsolete, and I've not wanted to install the new ones because I'll have to install like JetBrains or something, and that would be a task. But now that the Unity beta is starting to include prefabs, nested prefabs, when that becomes something that Unity publishes as a non-beta, I'll definitely be upgrading. Oh, the camera when the ship crashes into something. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I need to fix. I'm still not happy with how the ship controls. I have this image in my head of how it should work, but it's hard to translate into the game. And the edge cases, like slamming into stuff, still are very primitive. Originally, it was a physics game, and when you slammed into something hard enough to do that, it would actually kill you. That's no longer the case. You're now invincible when you crash into something like that. But the camera doesn't know that. All right, well, thanks for hanging out, and I will see you on Wednesday or next Saturday, whenever.